right now. Today is the day that you choose to change the rest of your life. It is time to turn your setback into the greatest comeback story ever told, and nobody is more capable than you. This is the Ranting Weight Watcher podcast, the future #1 weight loss podcast in the world. I am your host, Donato Russo. I hope you enjoy the show today. If this is your first time here and you enjoy the show, please subscribe and spread the word of the Ranting Weight Watcher podcast wherever you are and to whomever will listen. If you'd like to connect on social media or wherever else, check out my Linktree page, Linktree/the Ranting Weight Watcher. Let's connect today. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 177 of the Ranting Weight Watcher podcast. If this is your first time here, I want to welcome you to the show. If you enjoyed, I'd ask that you please consider subscribing. If the app you're using allows you to rate the show, please consider leaving a 4-star or 5-star rating. I just want to give a special thanks to a listener. Her name is Jerry. She became the first ever financial supporter of the show. And I just wanted to take a moment to thank her so much. Jerry, thank you so much. It is amazing that you would give financial support to the show and even give your time and effort into listening to the show. Thank you so much for what you've done. If anyone out there is interested in how she did it or of becoming financial supporter of the show, you can just click on the description of any episode that you're listening to and scroll down to the bottom of that description. You'll see a bunch of stuff about how to follow me. And then if you continue all the way to the bottom, there is a link on supporting the show. You can click that link, and if you're interested, you can do that. Man, am I excited about today's episode. I have a special guest. She is a nutritional scientist, a biochemical engineer. She is an author. She wrote the book that has changed everything about how I look at nutrition. The book is called Unlock Your Macrotype. We're talking about it right now. So without further ado, here is Christine Hronec. This means a lot to me that you would take your time. I know your time is valuable, that you're here.
Absolutely.
I have a couple of my listeners who have read your book and love your book. And I even have some that have joined your training program, I think. For the ones that didn't, can you tell them, a little bit about you, your health journey, and what motivated you to write the book?
Absolutely. So my name is Christine Hronec. I am a food scientist and chemical engineer, and I really got started with my health journey from the perspective of a distance runner. I used to do cross country. I used to train for marathons, but I really wasn't getting anywhere with regards to my physique goals. And I used to have the mindset that if I just ran enough miles, burned enough calories, I would look how I wanted to look. And I remember at that time being very frustrated, and I was like, there's got to be more to it than this. What am I doing wrong? And I have a science background, so I'm like, I have to be missing something here. And it wasn't until I really started to dial in what I was eating, really started to pay attention to the composition of my food, the proteins, carbs, and fats, because when I used to run so much, I felt so justified in eating all these extra calories because I was hungry. And it didn't matter how healthy I ate if the portions were too large. So with all that being said, I began exploring that journey as I was co-owning a dietary supplement manufacturing company at the time. I signed up to compete in my first fitness competition, and I got second place and qualified for nationals in that very first show. And shortly thereafter, Gauge Girl Training was born. Everyone was just asking me, how did you do it? What did you do? And so I was posting my journey along the way. This was like circa 2011, 2012, when Instagram was so new. And at that time, so many people were asking me for advice. And I began to share more and more and more. And not to belabor and just go so deep in the weeds with this, but I eventually started getting comfortable sharing more of my journey online. There used to be this online streaming app called Periscope. I'm not sure if you remember it. It was
I
owned
do.
by Twitter back in the day. And that's when I started doing these live stream type things. And I was like, I used to be so scared to go live and talk to people. I would write myself a script because I hated being put on the spot when you're asked a question that you don't know the answer to and you don't have an eloquent answer. But it just took a lot of practice, a lot of preparation. And I would spend all this time on that. I'm like, why am I not doing YouTube videos? Because I'm doing all this for a video that disappears in 24 hours. As I got into the YouTube space and grew there and really started to see all the questions that people had about health, I was like, there needs to be a resource to answer all of these questions. And I actually started writing my book a very long time ago. I started writing my book in 2015. It didn't come out until 7 years later. So it was a very, very long journey for me to get get the whole book written, get the right publisher, get the right message. And I'm glad I never gave up because it's here now. It's here now. And, I can walk into Barnes and Noble when I'm working on my laptop and see it on the shelves. And people still to this day utilize it as a resource. So I'm very grateful that I didn't give up.
I'm grateful as well. When I first started my whole journey, it was always this thing in my head, this stigma. Counting macros or keeping track of macros was for the elite, like the
Mm-hmm.
bodybuilders. It wasn't for people like me who are
Mm-hmm.
obese trying to become healthy. And that was above me. I couldn't do that. That was just my mentality. And in my process of my journey, I discovered there's a bunch of people who think the same as me. It's not just
Mm-hmm.
me thinking that way. Could you explain to anybody listening the benefits of tracking macros? What is the difference between, you know, someone like me who is on WW looking at points versus macros itself?
Yeah, absolutely. If it can't be measured, it can't be improved. And that's the scientist in me speaking. And there has to be ways to quantify what your body needs on a biochemical level. And the problem with just counting calories alone is the fact that the way calories from food impact your body is going to greatly depend on the composition of those foods. Proteins, carbs, and fats. All food is made up of only those three things. And based off of the distribution of those things, it's going to impact how you feel. It's going to impact your metabolism. It's going to impact your hormones. It's going to impact your body composition. And what I've seen for so long, and this has plagued so many people, where we would be so obsessed with this number on the scale. And I think that so many people have began to find so much more freedom and steering away from that number on the scale and focusing more on their body composition. Like, how much muscle do I have? What is my muscle mass relative to my body fat? And so many of us were so naive for so long to think that the number on the scale was the epitome of health when there's so many other biomarkers of health that are so much more meaningful.
Now, what brought you to the idea that there would be more than one way to do macros, the macro typing?
My clients, I'll be honest with you, I remember in the early days of Gauge Girl training in 2012, 2013, I was very much on a bro diet myself, which is more protein fueled, according to my book, Unlock Your Macrotype. But the thing is, I had clients that just didn't work for. And I was like, scratching my head. I'm like, well, you must not be following it. And they're like, no, Christine, I'm following it. And, when you're working side by side with somebody day in, day out, and they're like, I'm doing it, you're measuring their outcomes. You're looking at their waist measurement. You're looking at their body fat. You're looking at their progress photos, and they're following it for 1, 2, 3, 4, like weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, and they're not seeing changes. You're like, something has to give. And that's when I began to unpack this concept of understanding your carb tolerance, because not everybody responds the same to carbohydrates. And it really frustrates me sometimes when people are like, you're just not working hard enough to the masses, when it's not the case, because carb tolerance is a spectrum. There are folks who have a really high carb tolerance who can eat all the things and still look great. And that's awesome for that person. But that literally applies to like 1 to 5% of the masses. And what I started finding was maybe about 2/3 of my clients are don't necessarily do the best with the bodybuilder approach, which I like to call. And, these are ladies who it's not like they're going from a 2-pack to a 4-pack. These are people who just don't want to hate the way they look naked. And when you're in that boat and you're trying to tell somebody to eat this much protein and this little fat, and like, it just doesn't make sense. People are miserable. They're not getting results. And there's a better way to do it.
At this point, I have read your book twice. I have listened to the audiobook a number of times.
Nice.
I get a little bit from it every time. I think the only thing I question is, did I do the questions right, the quiz right? And I think that's the only thing out of everything you've laid out that I question. Did I do this wrong? Did I have the right mindset? When you created this quiz, how did you think that the people that were going to take it should answer it?
It's meant to assess your current situation, the reality of where you sit today, not what used to work, not what you think you want to be, but just the reality of now. And there are some people who question that, and I get DMs, I get emails where people are like, "Well, I'm not sure. Did I answer that right?" And I'm always happy to walk anybody through to clarify. Personally, like, I will talk to you in my DMs and say, "Hey, which question are you confused about?" And I'll clarify. But it's meant to be the reality of today.
Now, when I originally did it, I got the one that is high protein, moderate fat, and low carb. I think that's what it was.
Yeah, macro type 3.
Right. Now, is there generally a margin of error, right? So, because when in my experience of now transitioning your method into an app, a tracking app of choice, there was always this percentage that it didn't exactly fit the book. And my whole idea was, I want to apply this theory, like set in stone. Is there some sort of percentage where, okay, it's okay to be, as long as you're this close, it's okay?
Absolutely. So I would say in general, around 10% accuracy is fine, with a few caveats. When it comes to protein, you definitely don't want to go under your protein. For protein, I would say at protein level or over. For the fats and carbs, it's okay to be at or under. Because when you start overshooting the fats and you start overshooting the carbs, the calories can really trickle upwards. I would rather you be, within 10%, but protein, you always want to try to look at that number as the floor and not go under it. And then for the fats and carbs, it's kind of like the ceiling, and you want to try to stay at or under.
I wanted to find it before the interview, but I couldn't find it in the book. I believe there's a chapter in your book where you talk about, once you discover, or you talk about, okay, you discover this is your macro type, but what happens to the body if you choose not to eat this way? Could you describe to the people listening, like, if I'm protein dominant, what happens if I choose to eat more carbs than protein?
It's kind of like putting on the wrong size shoe. Like, it's just not going to be an optimal fit. Like, yes, you can still get limited results using an alternative approach, but the reality is your body has nutrient deficiencies and there's gaps there. So if you're not getting the right amount of protein, if you need more dietary fats to get your hormones in balance, if too much carbs are jacking up your insulin levels, and as a result of that high insulin, it's messing up like a cascade of other secondary processes, you're just not going to function as optimally as you could. So the thing that people need to understand, that it's about aligning what you need with aligning what you eat with what your body needs. And when those two things are in alignment, you're going to feel awesome. Like, fat loss is going to feel like almost effortless in a way, because you're doing what you're supposed to do.
You just mentioned a second ago about hormones. Is that when the balance of whatever the macro type needs versus what you want to eat, so are you throwing off hormones also in that case?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The quiz tells you that you should be fat fueled, where you would do better to consume higher levels of dietary fats, but you eat more towards a macro type 1, which is carb fueled, you're going to be miserable because like your success is going to be very limited. It's not optimally fueling your body because when those carbohydrate levels are too high for somebody who has a low carb tolerance, you're going to have to burn through all of these carbohydrates before your body can shift to fat burning mode. So it's just not optimal, as opposed to if your body's already in fat burning mode and it can just directly access that fat for fuel, as opposed to having to burn through all of this intramuscular glycogen and stored carbohydrates first. So you're really shooting yourself in the foot. It's not to say carbs are bad. It's not to say any macronutrient bad. No macronutrient is bad. It's about what's optimal for what you need at this point. And I really encourage people to not look at it as what you don't get to eat, but look at it as what you get to eat. I like to have a add to the plate mentality when it comes to these things.
The with regards to the hormone aspect
Mm-hmm.
of it, what are signs that the way they're choosing to eat is affecting their hormones? Is there a telltale?
Absolutely. One of the first signs is if, as a woman, your waist is north of 35 inches, that is a lot of visceral fat for a female to be carrying around. And it's greatly impeding your organs. And it's something that I call hormonal belly, which is when your hormones shift the distribution pattern of fat in your body. And it happens very easily when women are in a state of estrogen dominance, when they are in a state of elevated cortisol, or when there's an issue with their insulin management. The waist measurement is the first one. The waist to hip ratio is another one that I talk about in the book. Your hemoglobin A1C levels, if they are between 5.7 and 6.4, that you're in that pre-diabetic warning range, obviously north of 6.5 diabetic. If you are feeling really fatigued, if you're having painful periods, if your libido is off, if you wake up in the middle of the night between like 2 and 4 a.m., if you're having hot flashes, if you're having a lot of pain with your period, if you find that, like, even when you're in a caloric deficit and you're trying to lose weight and you're working out and you're going to the gym and you're genuinely doing all the things and nothing is budging. And when I say nothing is budging, I'm talking like a genuine effort, let's just say for a month, and nothing happens, it's a telltale sign your hormones are off. And I think understanding that it's not a crutch, it's not an excuse. It's just about shifting strategies and shifting focus. And I think that so many more people are becoming open-minded to the fact that, hey, what I did in my teens, in my 20s, in my 30s, that may not work anymore. And that's okay. Our bodies change and it's okay to adapt.
When you're working with a client,
Mm-hmm.
and let's say you help them to discover that they're fat fueled,
Sure.
or whatever the case may be, whichever
Yeah.
one of their macro types they are. What are some roadblocks you encounter with your clients that like what are the biggest ones that when they discover this?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think one of the biggest roadblocks is it's a new way of eating. And it's very different from what they're used to. And as people are messing around with MyFitnessPal or whatever app that they choose, they might be finding, well, that they're chronically under on one macronutrient. And it's ironic because the macronutrient that they need the most of tends to be the one that they are the most deficient in. So I have fat fueled folks, let's say their goal is to hit, I don't know, 140 grams of fat per day on a more keto style eating program, but they're only hitting 80, 90 a day. And then they're like, Christine, I'm not seeing progress. I'm like, you're not hitting your macros. And we'll go back and forth, back and forth. And then by the third, fourth week, they're like, okay, I'm really going to dial this in. They're like, Christine, now I'm seeing progress. I'm like, it's because you're following the roadmap. It's like your GPS is like, turn left. And you keep missing the turn. You keep missing the turn. And I'm kind of used to it, but I kind of expect it in a way because there is a learning curve and it is new for people. But I give people a lot of credit because changing the way one eats is very hard to do. I've heard it said somewhere, it's harder to change the way a man eats than it is his religion. Because we have these just ingrained habits and patterns and we like what we like. But I encourage people to not look at it as we're not taking away pleasure, we're taking away pain. Your body's inflamed. You're bloated, you're carrying on to excess weight that is making you sluggish, that's making you tired, that's impacting your cognitive function, it's impacting your libido, it's impacting your fertility, it's just impacting your life in such a negative way. We're not taking away like all these fun things like to make your life miserable. We're taking away the pain so you can actually live.
I love that. I love that whole idea. I had told you in our conversation previous that I fully believe in your methods after implementing them. I everything just makes sense. It's big, one of the biggest revelations. And so many people, anybody who is willing to listen to me, I tell them, you should read this book. And every time they're struggling, I tell them they should read your book. And in a couple of times, they have gotten to the point where they take the quiz. And it's so funny because so many of the people who listen are women. So many of them discover that they're fat fueled and they're like, no, this can't be right. I must have done something wrong. Is your experience that your clients that are women that discovered they're fat fueled, do they have the same pushback? No, there's no way I can need to eat more fat.
Absolutely. I see it early, I see it often. But here's the interesting thing though. Let's say somebody's fat fueled where they're macro type 5, which is the highest amount of fat, lowest amount of carbs. Eventually, as you minimize your carbohydrates and improve your insulin sensitivity, you start to shift into macro type 4, which is a little bit less fat and a little bit more carbs. And then you shift into macro type 3. And I find a lot of people ultimately end up settling somewhere between macro type 2 and 3 once they hit an optimal level of health. So your macro type will change with time as you improve your markers of health. And your body will be able to manage your carbs a lot better. So your carb tolerance does functionally improve as you heal your body from the inside out.
Okay, so then in my quest here, what would be a telltale sign that it's time to redo the quiz or check my calories again or something like that to keep it
I
going?
would say if you've been following the strategy like solid for at least 12 weeks, I think that if you're starting to hit plateaus, I think that it's not even just plateaus. I think it's a matter of how you're feeling. And the reality is I'm not trying to take nutrients away from anybody. And eventually I do want people to be able to follow their eating style for their macro type. I'd say 80-90% of the time. I would love to get people to that level where they can follow 80-90% of the time, 10-20% of the time, have a little bit of food freedom, because the ultimate goal is to live a sustainable, healthy life and not be dieting for the rest of your life. And I think so many people sell themselves short in never being able to get to that maintenance level because they won't buckle down long enough to do the work to heal their body. And it really frustrates me and it really makes me sad that everyone just wants a shortcut. There is no shortcut. There really isn't. You're going to have to put in the time. You're going to have to be diligent for a concerted amount of time. And with that time, your body will heal, your body will improve. But understanding the best way to fuel your unique body type is so crucial because I've seen so many people come to me who've been put on these bodybuilder style meal plans and they don't need it. And then conversely, I've had other folks who are put on these keto plans who don't need to be keto either. And I think that so many people are lost in terms of what do I need as a person. And that's why I love the carb tolerance quiz. I love the actual quiz because it's for the individual. They're like, just because something works for one person doesn't mean it's going to work for you. Like that has zero bearing. That's why I get a little frustrated sometimes online. You see like these what I eat in a day things. And I used to do those things in the past as well, but that works for that person. That has no bearing on what's going to work for you.
I try to explain that to people. I've gotten a number of emails in my time because I'm chasing health here for 5 years. And
Hmm.
can you just list out everything you eat in a day. I'm like, well, what I eat is not going to be what you want. It's not going to work.
Exactly.
Just because it worked for me doesn't mean it's going to work for you. I try to explain that, but I give them what they want in the end. I hope that it works out for them or something. They get something from it in the end, but it is something I've encountered myself in my progress here. So tell us now a little bit about Gauge Girl Training.
So, Gauge Girl Training is an online meal planning and coaching service. It started in 2013, and actually, Gauge Girl Training turns 11 next month. So, it'll be 11 years in business. I've worked with over 50,000 clients all over the world, everywhere, for people from being, having hundreds of pounds to lose, to Olympic athletes, to celebrities, to bariatric. I mean, I've canvassed it all over the years. But at the end of the day, the thing that I find the most exciting is my most successful clients are not the folks with the most resources. They are the folks who are the most resourceful. And there's nothing more exciting to me when I see somebody who's just mentally ready to commit to the process, and not even just commit, to surrender to the process. Because I think sometimes people come into fat loss, weight loss, not really mentally ready. And like they want the result, but they're not emotionally ready to shift their lifestyle. And I think that that takes a lot of soul searching within an individual. And one part of Gauge Girl Training that I'm really proud of is we have a really nice private Facebook community. It's a very intimate environment where people get to connect with one another and talk through their challenges. And from time to time, I like to do these kind of like heart to heart chats, not just all science, 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 because there is a huge human element of this process, and a little bit of encouragement goes a long way.
Is Unlock Your Macrotype it? Is there anything new you're writing? What's going on?
Yes, I'm writing a new book all about hormones, and I don't have a title yet, but I want to break down how hormones impact fat loss. And I think that there's a lot of misunderstandings. There's no defined standards for what hormone level should be. There's very poorly defined testing methods to even accurately measure them, from clients being just gaslit from their doctors saying you don't need this, to the other spectrum where they just slap women with hormonal contraceptives. I have clients who are in their late 50s who are still on hormonal birth control. And the reality is, over 50% of women on the pill don't need it for contraceptive use. They're using it to mask other underlying hormonal issues. And it's important to understand, because people only dig deep with hormones when it comes to fertility testing, or if if you're in menopause. But there's a huge gap in the general public's understanding of how hormones impact your body, how it impacts how you should eat. I have this hormone reset protocol that I've been working on since 2017, came out in like 2020, 2021. And it's my best-selling program of all time. And people are shocked because it's a higher calorie plan. When people think resetting your hormones, they think like green juices and cleanses and very low calories. But I have clients eating more calories than they've ever eaten in their life, and they're losing body fat, and they're like, I don't understand it, Christine. And I have some new strategies up my sleeve regarding tracking specific nutrient deficiencies a little bit deeper than protein, carbs, and fats, and boiling down into specific nutrients that are tied as markers to hormone health. And I'm just so excited. So
Any idea of release date or?
It's too soon to tell. It's too soon to tell.
Okay, okay.
I don't want to say the wrong thing.
I
So
got you. I got you. Can you tell everyone listening how to find you and your social medias?
yes, if anyone wants to connect with me personally, you guys can shoot me a private message on Instagram at Gauge Girl Training. It's GAUGEGIRL Training. I'm on YouTube, Gauge Girl Training. TikTok, I'm playing over there now, Gauge Girl Training. Pinterest, Facebook, all the places, but I'm most active on YouTube and Instagram.
I want to tell you a little bit how I found you.
Sure.
uh, as your book was about to release, that was March of, what was it, 22?
22,
Yeah.
yeah.
It was, I want to say it was the Christmas season. And I was really wanting to know more about, because I just wanted to know about macros. I wanted to understand them. And I was searching YouTube after YouTube, and then I found you. And I was like, suddenly you were saying it in a way that I could understand, because it sounded like it was another language to me prior to that. And I had sent you a message asking you something about macros, and you had mentioned your book was coming out. I pre-ordered that book that day.
Oh, wow.
The same day that you answered me, and the fact that you answered me immediately, almost within minutes of me emailing you, was extremely impressive to me. And I said, okay, that alone warrants me ordering this book. And then
that's so cool.
I got it as soon as Amazon was allowing the pre-release. I got it. And then it sat on my bookshelf for a year. And I was on Weight Watchers, and I got to the point where I hit 150 pounds lost. And
wow. Congratulations.
Thank you. And I didn't realize it at the time. When you're in the mix, you don't really realize what you're doing. A year went by, and I'm just going like to 155 pounds lost, and then down to 145 pounds lost. And I'm dancing in between there, but not making any more real progress. And I said, well, what's going on here? Why am I dancing around like this? I'm doing everything the way I planned to. And that's when I said to myself, okay, I tell my listeners, when things are not going and you think you're doing it right, now it's time to educate yourself. And that's when I looked at your book sitting on my shelf, and I said, I guess it's time to open this book. That's and it awesome. Ended up being a year after receiving it. I read the book, and then so April of last year, I finally implemented, I discovered really my perception of where I was and where I actually was were two completely different things. I thought I was eating high protein. I was not. I was eating more than triple the amount of carbs, and a lot of this had to do with the amount of fruit I was eating.
Okay.
And that reminds me of another thing I wanted to ask you, but so I started to adjust, and I had to do it incrementally, because where you were saying basically I was more than quadruple it, and I had to do it in steps, right?
For sure. That makes sense.
And right now I'm at 175 grams of carbs, where your book says I should be 140 grams, 144. And I'm finding it a lot harder to go lower than 175, to be honest with you right now. I am really struggling to bring myself, because and this is where people are saying, well, maybe it's not, you shouldn't be counting these things as carbs. And because they're saying that fruit has fiber. How do you go with that? There's this whole net carbs, gross carbs thing. Where do you go? Your book doesn't really say anything about that.
I think definitely for macrotypes 4 and 5, I'm 1000% on net carbs. But you're kind of at macrotype 3. I think if you need to do net carbs for you, and if that makes more sense, I'm reasonable with that when it comes to the individual. I think for you, it would probably make sense for you to do net carbs, because that way, meaning, total carbs minus fiber, and that's your total carbohydrates. Because, when you're getting enough of that fiber, you're going to feel more full and satisfied, as opposed to choosing carbohydrates that are more like sugar, starchy based type things. So in your case, I would definitely do net carbs. It would just make so much more sense, because that's what's going to make you full and satisfied. And, especially if you're aiming for at least 30 grams of fiber per day, that'll put you.
I'm averaging it, actually. I'm oftentimes I'm more than that. I'm like 37 grams.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a really good fiber intake. So, I would do the net carbs in your case.
Okay. That's awesome. Thank you so much.
No
you have basically you've made it so that I can get to, so my goal is to lose 200 pounds.
Okay.
I'm now at 175. Since implementing your theories, I've dropped another 25 pounds.
Congratulations.
And it has definitely been a battle, and I'm ready to continue fighting. And your book has given me new life of realizing that there's more to it than counting points. There's more to it than counting calories and all these things, that what you eat matters. It's not just And
And
it's been a great realization.
And it's funny because the closer you get to the goal, that's when those details matter so much more. Like, in the beginning of the journey, just there's so much low hanging fruit, but as you really fine tune, that's where these strategies really come to life and play out in real life. But if you ever have questions or you're ever confused about anything, please feel free to reach out to me because I see these types of common roadblocks all the time. And a lot of times there's so many strategies outside of just lowering your calories when you get stuck. And you'd be surprised at all the little nuances that you can functionally do to navigate those things. So if you ever have any questions, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yes, it's been fun. It's been so fun. We should definitely do this again sometime.
I would love to do this again. I'd
Yeah,
love to do it in a way that where it's not just, it could just be a casual conversation, and
absolutely.
then we
I
could
would
just
love
talk
that.
about whatever's going on in health in general, and just kind of what we
Dude, we
think
need to
about.
talk about Ozempic. We need to talk about all the GLP-1 meds someday. We can
That
definitely.
would be amazing, amazing. I would love to get into that with you.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
just some kind of deep conversation here. I like to bring the heart out of people. If I could snap my fingers and transport you back in time to talk to day one you, and you have all of the knowledge you've obtained, she has no idea who you are, what would you say? Just take a couple of minutes. Anything you would say to her.
I would definitely. I had no idea that my just needing to prove something to myself that I could run a marathon, that I could do this, that I could do this, that because I get really frustrated when I can't do something and nothing comes easy to me. And as opposed to looking at things not coming easy to me as a weakness, that's like the biggest strength I've ever had in my life. And it took me, decades to figure that out. But it's okay for things to be hard. It's okay for them to take a long time. Like even writing this book, like the fact that it even exists, like 7 years, that's a long time for a lot of people. It was a long time for me. And there were times I never thought it was going to happen. But just because something takes a long time, it does not mean it's not going to happen. And I think that there needs to be an overall agenda of just perpetual hope, perpetual positivity, and just never giving up because you never know how close you are. Things may be so much closer than they really are, but it's just so much of our own limiting beliefs that hold us back. And there's nothing more awesome than just seeing somebody trust and believe in themselves.
Can you see what I've been preparing you all for? This journey you're on, it's so much more than you becoming healthy. It is a complete transformation of your entire life. Health is just the beginning. This whole thing is about you becoming the best version of yourself. And this information you received today is part of all of this because it's not just about getting on Weight Watchers and staying on Weight Watchers or keto or any of the other programs. It's about the entire growth to make you the best version of yourself. That's what it was always from the beginning, and that's what it always will be. And the system and how the method of how you get there, it really doesn't matter. It's all up to you. And whatever way you get there, I want you to know everything I learn in the process. And the way you implement it, it's completely up to you. I love each and every one of you. God bless you all.